Hello, welcome to Module 11. We're going to be talking about fuel sources, but specifically alternative fuels. So we covered fossil fuels in previous modules, and then in this module we're going to cover alternative fuels. And the alternative fuels tagline is actually a specific set of fuels that are designated by the Department of Energy. And they consist of non-petroleum based fuel sources, and they have some different benefits or some specific criteria that they have to meet. And the Department of Energy basically says that there's multiple reasons why one would want to use an alternative fuel, but some of the best reasons are petroleum displacement, so that we're not singularly dependent on one source of dependent fuel, and we have multiple other fuel sources in case that fuel source ever becomes scarce or unusable. Energy diversity, to allow them to have an open marketplace with multiple sources. Air quality improvement. This is kind of a hit or miss depending on the fuel source. It can improve air quality, but some of it also can just mean that we're creating a different form of fuel pollution. So instead of carbon monoxide, we might be putting more nitrous oxide in the atmosphere based on this fuel source. Greenhouse gas emission reduction and domestic economic development. This is just talking about the world estimates on oil supply, and just as a reminder, we are leveling off as far as what is available. We kind of know what our oil supplies are. We know where they are, so we know what our housings are. And as things like ice sheets melt back, we're going to gain more access to some of those known oil sources, so they'll become easier to get at. But overall, what fossil fuel has been created over time in the Earth's natural geologic cycles is the fossil fuel that we have. And once we spend all of that, it's gone. So we won't have it anymore. As far as shares of emissions, when we talk about how much each emission contributes to the atmosphere, CO2 is 33%, so that's down here. CO2 is 33% of all CO2. So out of the 100% of CO2 that gets spewed into the atmosphere, 33% is based on transportation. Carbon monoxide is 79%. Nitrous oxides, this is volatile organic compounds, VOCs, volatile organic compounds, 44%. Particulates, this is all the solid matter that comes out the back end. So this is like all my little metallic particles, except for lead. Lead is the only one that gets its own designation, and that's because of the dangers of lead. It can cause brain damage. So it's really important to separate lead into its own category. And transportation does cause about 13% of all lead pollution. And then sulfur dioxide down here. As far as where we stand, about 95% of all of the transportation sector is dependent on petroleum fossil fuels. So whether it be a gasoline or a diesel, we are talking about full-on dependence. As far as how much we use, about 67% of all our petroleum uses is a U.S.-based petroleum currently. That's my current number. I just looked that up for you, Department of Energy. We're at 67%. Current use of in-house processed. We produce a significant share of U.S. pollution is released by transportation, and has major impacts on our consumption. Obviously, if we noticed any time that we have a major storm and our gas supply gets interrupted, the prices go up. So it has a huge impact on our economic stability and consumption. And currently, there is no big competitor against a petroleum. So our petroleum products are the big winner here, and there really is no one who holds a big enough share of the market to compete against petroleum. But there is reasons or benefits to move away from those fuels. And so talking about what falls into that alternative transport fuels, well, electricity, ethanol, hydrogen, methanol, natural gas, which can come in two different forms. So we can have NGCs, natural gas that's compressed, and NGLs, natural gas, which is our liquefied. Propanes, biodiesels. There's what's called P series. These are mixed groupings. So these are things with like methanol and butane mixed together. So these are mixed series fuels. All fall into these. What's currently allowed on the market, and we have vehicles available to you for purchase, is electric, ethanol, natural gas, and propane. There are reasons for developing this transportation. I'm going to let you just read these slides because there's no reason, but there's long-term outcomes and deployment strategies for why we're going to do this. This is my nice little cheat sheet on these simple forms of fuel. And so before I go into them in greater detail, we have biodiesel, but biodiesel on the market in a vehicle that you can purchase right now is what's called a B20. When we put a number next to it, and you're going to see this with ethanols too, when we put a B and a 20 next to it, what we're saying is that the diesel that's in this fluid is 20% bio. And the rest, the other 80%, is all just standard petroleum-based diesel. And that's the one that we can have on the market unless you're building your own grease-style vehicle, which is 100% diesel. That could be biological production. Compressed natural gas, this is CNGs. Electric, we see these all over. And then ethanols, you can see E85. Right now, when you go to the gas pump, you're filling up with E15. Most gasolines contain some ethanol in them, so you have an E15. E85 is a special vehicle that has all its rubber hosing flipped over to synthetic hosing, so it won't get eaten away with the high ethanol count, and can actually handle, as well as the engine itself, can handle the high ethanol within the vehicle. And that's our E85. So 85% is ethanol. Hydrogen, there are no current hydrogen vehicles on the market that are commercial sale, but we have developed hydrogen vehicles, and I'll show those because they're actually hydrogen meets natural gas. They're like a mixed vehicle. Liquefied natural gas, liquefied propane in it's there, and then methanols, and that's M85s. So talking about biodiesel, as far as which biodiesel is the most useful, palm oil holds the biggest share. If you are going to produce biodiesel, you would produce out of palm oil and then coconut, and then as we go down through different materials. As you notice, corn is really low, and this is why for a long time we were talking about corn being the big thing. We were going to make methanol in this country. It was going to be great. And then we realized corn does not do a very good job at producing a good amount of material. Once again, I'll let you guys read about the 20. As far as biodiesel goes, if you buy a vehicle that is a diesel vehicle, and you want to run it on biodiesels, you can do it by purchasing biodiesel-based gas, and you can find gases that are diesel 20s, so B20 diesels that you can find. But you can also produce it yourself. Strangely enough, biodiesel is one of those easy things to produce. You could actually do it yourself with some canola oil in a pressure cooker. So it's not that complicated. Obviously, it's highly volatile. You wouldn't want to go sticking your hands in it once you produce it, but you can actually make it yourself. And so this is a home-built system. And this is what a lot of people who have chosen to go and convert like their tractors or their farm equipment over to a diesel have started doing. They are now producing their own biodiesel with materials that they're growing on the farm. So they are farm raising something like a corn, producing a diesel with their corn, and running their tractor supplies on it. So they're becoming self-sufficient in-house with their own fuels. Just talking a little bit about how the market has grown in tons of biodiesel production, and then which countries are big on the biodiesel production in the world. Natural gas. So natural gas is a lot of times something that we siphon off of a petro product. We talked about this with fossil fuels. But we also know we can go into old places where petroleum used to be, but the natural gas is left over, and we can go in and now tap that and take advantage of that natural gas. One of the big vehicles that's out there is compressed natural gas vehicles. They're also known as the propane trucks. Another option for these natural gas vehicles is to be hydrogen-based natural gas. So we can create hydrogen models or fuel cell models. When we talk about a fuel cell vehicle, a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, those hydrogen fuel cell vehicles that we are currently producing are actually natural gas-based hydrogen, because we're producing the hydrogen through a natural gas burning process in the fuel cell transfer. And just a little visual of these natural gas vehicles and the natural gas fill-up on its line. I'm going to pick up with the next vehicle on the list. And like I said, I'm going to let you guys read the slides, so take your time. But for the most part, you can just see what's available, and I'll see you in part 2.